Our first story takes place in a small, quiet town, where a group of friends decided to play a game of hide and seek in the woods one summer evening. Little did they know, their innocent game would turn into a nightmare they would never forget. It was a warm, breezy evening when Jack, Sarah, and Tom gathered at the edge of the woods. The sun was setting, casting long shadows among the trees. They had played hide and seek here many times before, but tonight felt different. The air was thick with an unexplainable tension, and the rustling of leaves seemed louder, more sinister. Sarah was the seeker, and as she counted to 30, Jack and Tom darted into the woods, searching for the perfect hiding spot. Jack found a dense thicket and crouched down, trying to control his breathing. Tom, on the other hand, ventured deeper into the forest, feeling a strange pull guiding him further away from his friends. As Sarah counted, the forest grew darker, the sun dipping below the horizon. Jack could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears, blending with the distant sound of Sarah's counting. He felt a chill run down his spine, but he shook it off, telling himself it was just his imagination. The minutes passed, and Sarah began her search. She found Jack quickly, as his hiding spot was not as secluded as he had hoped. Together they started calling out for Tom, but there was no response. Their calls grew louder and more desperate as the night grew darker. The woods, once a familiar playground, now seemed like a labyrinth of shadows and whispers. Tom, meanwhile, had found an old, abandoned cabin deep in the woods. The door was ajar, and against his better judgment, he stepped inside. The air was musty, and the floorboards creaked under his weight. As he explored, he found strange, childlike drawings on the walls, depicting eerie figures playing hide and seek. Each drawing seemed more disturbing than the last, with wide, hollow eyes staring back at him. Tom felt a shiver of fear, but curiosity pushed him forward. He moved deeper into the cabin, noticing old, dusty furniture covered in cobwebs. A small, broken mirror hung on the wall, reflecting a distorted version of himself. As he approached it, he thought he saw movement in the reflection, but when he turned around, there was nothing there. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind him. Panic set in as he tried to open it, but it was locked tight. The whispers grew louder, surrounding him, and he felt a cold hand on his shoulder. Tom spun around, but there was no one there. The whispers turned into laughter, a childlike giggle that echoed through the room, and he realized he was not alone. Back outside, Jack and Sarah stumbled upon the cabin. They heard Tom's frantic cries for help and rushed to the door. Together they managed to force it open, and Tom burst out, pale and trembling. He could barely speak, but he managed to say, "We need to leave, now." As they ran through the forest, the whispers seemed to follow them, growing fainter as they neared the edge of the woods. They didn't stop running until they were safely back in the clearing, the cabin now a distant silhouette in the darkness. They never spoke of that night again, but they all knew one thing for certain: something was lurking in those woods, something that loved to play hide and seek. Jack, Sarah, and Tom avoided the woods after that, their once beloved playground now tainted with fear. They tried to return to normal life, but the memory of that night lingered like a shadow over them. Years later, as adults, they occasionally crossed paths and exchanged knowing glances. They had all moved on, or so they pretended, but the scars of that night remained. Tom, in particular, was haunted by nightmares. In his dreams, he was back in the cabin, the whispers growing louder until they were deafening. He would wake up in a cold sweat, the echo of that childlike laughter ringing in his ears. One night, Tom decided to confront his fears. He returned to the town and ventured into the woods alone, determined to find the cabin and put his nightmares to rest. The forest was just as he remembered it, dark and foreboding. He found the cabin easily, as if it had been waiting for him. Stepping inside, he felt the same musty air and heard the familiar creak of the floorboards. The drawings were still on the walls, now more faded but no less disturbing. He stood in front of the mirror, his reflection staring back at him. This time he didn't look away when he saw the movement. A figure appeared behind him in the mirror, a small child with hollow eyes and a twisted smile. Tom turned around, but the room was empty. The whispers began again, soft at first, then louder, more insistent. "Come play with us," they seemed to say. Tom felt a cold hand on his shoulder and knew he had to leave. He ran from the cabin, the laughter following him into the night. As he reached the edge of the woods, he looked back one last time. The cabin stood silent, but he knew the game was not over. Jack, Sarah, and Tom never returned to the woods again. They knew that whatever lurked there was waiting, always waiting, for someone to play hide and seek. And they had no intention of ever playing that game again. Our second story comes from a quiet suburban neighborhood where a group of children decided to play hide and seek in an old, abandoned house at the end of their street. The house had been empty for years, and rumors of hauntings only added to its allure. It was a chilly autumn afternoon when Lily, Ben, and Emma stood in front of the dilapidated house. The windows were boarded up, and the paint was peeling. The air was filled with the scent of damp wood and decay. Despite the unease, the thrill of the game drove them forward. Ben was the seeker this time, and as he counted to 50, Lily and Emma slipped into the house. The interior was even more foreboding, with broken furniture and cobwebs hanging from the ceiling. Lily found a hiding spot in a dusty wardrobe, while Emma hid under a rickety staircase. As Ben counted, the house seemed to come alive with creaks and groans. Shadows danced on the walls, and the air grew colder, making Lily and Emma shiver in their hiding spots. The house felt like it was watching them, waiting for the right moment to strike. Ben finished counting and began his search. The house was eerily silent, save for the occasional creak of the floorboards. He found Lily first, her eyes wide with fear as she emerged from the wardrobe. Together, they searched for Emma, calling her name through the dark, musty corridors. Emma, however, was nowhere to be found. As they continued their search, they stumbled upon a hidden door in the basement. It was partially open, and a faint light emanated from within. Hesitantly, they descended the creaky stairs and entered the room. Inside, they found a small, dimly lit room with strange symbols drawn on the walls. In the center was an old, wooden chest. The whispers grew louder as they approached it, their hearts pounding in their chests. They knew Emma had to be in there. With trembling hands, Ben opened the chest. Inside, they found Emma, but she was not alone. A shadowy figure loomed over her, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. The room filled with an icy chill as the figure spoke in a raspy voice, "You shouldn't have come here." Grabbing Emma, they fled the house, never looking back. They never spoke of the incident again, but the house remained a dark, looming presence in their lives. They knew that whatever was inside that house was still there, waiting for the next game of hide and seek. Lily, Ben, and Emma tried to return to their normal lives, but the memory of that day haunted them. The house stood at the end of their street, a constant reminder of their terrifying experience. At night, they sometimes thought they could hear faint whispers calling their names, echoing through the quiet streets. Ben, who had been the bravest among them, found himself avoiding the house completely. He took longer routes to school and refused to play in the nearby park. The fear that had gripped him in the basement room never quite left him. He often woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, with the shadowy figure's glowing eyes etched into his mind. Lily, who had always been curious and adventurous, now felt a deep-seated fear of the dark. The wardrobe where she had hidden seemed to loom in her room, a dark void she avoided at all costs. She would double-check her closet and under her bed before sleeping, a habit she couldn't shake off. Emma, the youngest, was the most affected. She rarely spoke of what she saw inside the chest, but her once cheerful demeanor turned quiet and withdrawn. Her parents noticed the change but could never get her to talk about what happened. At school, she became the subject of whispers and rumors, her classmates sensing the darkness that had touched her. Years later, when the children had grown up and moved away, the house remained. New families came and went, each hearing the same old stories about the haunted house at the end of the street. Some children, drawn by the allure of the unknown, would venture inside, but they never stayed long. The whispers and the shadows would always drive them away. One summer, a group of teenagers decided to explore the house, dismissing the stories as mere legends. They entered, laughing and joking, but their laughter soon turned to silence as they felt the oppressive atmosphere inside. They split up to search the house, just like Lily, Ben, and Emma had done years before. As they explored, they found the same hidden door in the basement. The symbols on the walls were faded but still visible, and the old chest sat in the center of the room. Curious and unafraid, one of the teens opened it, only to find it empty. They laughed nervously, but the air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to close in around them. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, trapping them inside. The whispers began, soft and sinister, filling the room. The teenagers tried to escape, but the door wouldn't budge. Panic set in as they realized they were not alone. The shadowy figure appeared, its eyes glowing with the same malevolent intent. "You shouldn't have come here," it repeated, the raspy voice sending chills down their spines. In a desperate attempt, they managed to break the door open and fled the house, their hearts racing. They never spoke of what they had seen, but they, too, would never forget. The house remained at the end of the street, a silent, dark reminder of the terrors within. Lily, Ben, and Emma, now adults living their separate lives, heard about the teenagers' encounter. It brought back memories they had tried to bury. They reconnected, sharing their experiences and realizing that the house still had its grip on them. Together, they decided to visit the house one last time, hoping to find closure. As they approached the house, the familiar scent of damp wood and decay greeted them. They entered cautiously, the memories of their childhood adventure flooding back. The house was just as they remembered it, frozen in time. They descended into the basement, finding the room with the symbols and the chest. This time they came prepared. Ben, now an amateur paranormal investigator, had brought equipment to document their findings. Lily carried a flashlight, her hand trembling slightly, while Emma clutched a small charm her grandmother had given her for protection. They stood in the room, the whispers starting again, but they were determined to face whatever was there. Ben set up his equipment, capturing the eerie atmosphere on camera. The shadowy figure appeared, but this time they were not afraid. "We know what you are," Ben said, his voice steady, "and we are not here to play." The figure seemed to waver, its form flickering. Emma held up her charm, and the room grew brighter, the shadows retreating. The whispers turned into a single, piercing scream before fading away. The figure vanished, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. The three friends stood in silence, the room now just an ordinary, abandoned basement. They had faced their fear and broken the house's hold on them. As they left, they felt a sense of relief and closure. The house at the end of the street remained, but its dark presence was gone. They knew they had finally put the past to rest, and they could move on with their lives, free from the shadows of their childhood. If you haven't already, consider subscribing to our channel for more content like this. Your support helps us keep creating awesome content for you.